As we go through this course, we're going to talk a lot about some of the ways that we can do configurations in Windows. And it turns out that there are a lot of them. So I'd like to kind of run down some of those for you so that you can put them in your brain when we talk about a different configuration tool. You can kind of get an idea of where it sits in the system. The first is UWP apps, or Universal Windows Platform Apps. These are a new type of app. These are the kind of apps that you can buy in the Windows, or excuse me, not the Windows Store. They now call it the Microsoft Store. And they're quite a bit different from the old legacy apps that we used to have. The most notable one is the Settings app. If I click here on Start and then go up here to Settings, we open up this app here where I can make several system configurations. And this is one of those UWP style apps. The next one are Control Panel apps. Now, Control Panel has been around for a long time. If I type Control Panel here, I can open the main screen of the Control Panel. Now, this is kind of a catch-all window that has lots and lots of different configuration settings in it, or lots of different configuration tools in it. So, for example, as I drill down in here into these different configuration tools, these things load into the Control Panel. These quite often have a CPL extension, file extension type, although that's not 100% true. Some have exe file types in them, but typically these are called applets, and these applets kind of snap into the Control Panel application itself. The third one are MMCs, or Microsoft Management Console snap-ins. The Microsoft Management Console looks like this. And it's just a big empty window like this. It's got there, as you can see, it's just an empty window that has no configuration tools in it at all. But I can add configuration tools to it. Click File, and then Add Remove Snap-in. And now you can see I can add things like the Device Manager, the Event Viewer, the Disk Manager, and so on. Lots of different management tools. And once I add these tools, then I can do my configurations inside these tools. Now, quite often we just skip going directly to the MMC Manager itself, and we just go straight to what it is we want to get to, and that is usually an MSC, or Microsoft Snap-in Console application. So, for example, devmgmt.msc, the Microsoft Snap-in Console, will bring me straight to the Device Manager. It looks just like the one we saw in the MMC. In fact, this is running in an MMC, but the view has been changed a little bit so that and by the way, I can bring back some of those items in the view here, so that it shows in a simpler window. But that is an MMC snap-in. The registry is the fourth one of these things. I'm going to type regedit. Now, this is actually an MMC. So I'm going to type MSC, and you see I come up to the Registry Editor. This is actually inside of the Microsoft Management Console, and it's one of the tools inside the MMC console. However, because it's so unique and important to configuration, I thought it was a good idea to put it separately in my list. The next one is a group policy. This again is an MMC snap-in. So a group policy is right here, gpedit.msc, and this brings up an MMC snap-in where I can set policy settings, and these policy settings are settings that will take effect at the time that I start up my system, or at the time that I log in or somebody logs into the system. So I can set computer settings that take place when I start the system, and user settings that take place when a user logs in. The next one we have here are standalone graphical applications. The MMC is actually a standalone graphical application, but so are some of these things. For example, the cleanmanager.exe. If I copy that and just bring it up down here and hit enter, you'll see that I have this pop-up at a graphical user interface application that is a standalone application. It's not an MMC, it doesn't go into group policy, it's just a standalone application that I can run in order to clean up my drive. So these are these standalone graphical applications as opposed to the UWP or Microsoft Store type applications. These are more traditional application types. The next one is the command line. The command line looks like this. CMD will bring up the command prompt, and I have several tools in here. So for example, copy, and I can copy, say, from one drive to another drive. So I can do stuff to the system with commands that are built into this command prompt. The next one I have, besides the command line, is something called Powershell. And Powershell is also a command line tool, and it has its own commands. These are quite a bit different from the commands in the command line. They have a completely different structure, and there are many, many more of them. Whereas you have 30 or 40 basic internal commands in the command line, you have 2,000 or 3,000 of them in PowerShell. So a lot of command line commands here. Finally, our external command line and PowerShell commands. By external commands, we mean that they're not built into PowerShell or the command line, but they will only run in PowerShell or the command line. As an example, let's choose ipconfig. Now this is ipconfig.exe, and it actually is a standalone application, but you notice it runs here in the command line. It does not run as a GUI. If I try to run it, yeah, it ran, but it didn't pop up a window for me to do anything in. And it ran, in that case, in the command line. Because that particular exe file is not a GUI application. It is designed only to run in the command line, but it is not an internal command line command. As a matter of fact, it happens to live in, I'll show you where it lives here. You go down to this PC, C, Windows, System 32, and it lives down in here. If I go down to ipconfig, right here. So quite often you'll see this sort of icon. It looks kind of like a little command line window there. So these are executable applications, executable programs, but they do not start up in a separate GUI. You have to run them by command in a command line tool such as PowerShell or the command line. So those are the various places that we can configure things in Windows. And bear in mind that I could really pare this down in a way. So for example, group policy, well, that's really an MMC. And the registry is actually an MMC. And some of these control panel applets are actually executable, standalone graphical executable applications. So there's some crossover here, but these are the primary big places where you might make configuration changes. And many of the configuration changes that you make actually put in the registry the actual changes that you're making. So in other words, when I make a change in an MMC or make a change in a command line or a standalone graphical application, quite often what it's doing is actually making a change in the registry itself. So these become quite intertwined. It's interesting, but if you keep your mind on these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different places, you'll have a pretty good handle on what kind of tools we're talking about when I talk about, well, this is an MMC, or this is a control panel tool, or this is a standalone app. You'll know kind of what I'm talking about.